Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month, the month in which we discuss the contributions that geeky gentlemen have made to history but that have been ignored by biased educational system, except not at all. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
Steve Vaxey.
Okay, there we go. I don't know if there's a delay or if you're just pausing for dramatic effect. Anyway.
Nah, I think there's a delay.
Oh no! Okay, I think it's solved. Anyway.
Oh no!
So today we're here to review a bit of a shot in the dark from me, which I think kind of is a bit telling because it's definitely not a movie I would have picked had I watched it before. Or I guess let me rephrase that. I don't think there would be many other situations in which I would seek a movie like this out. And that's Camelot from 1981. This is a very filmy, capital F film.
Excalibur, you mean?
Yeah, portrayal of the events of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. And I will say, I didn't hate it. I actually did quite enjoy it for the most part. For being about 2.5 hours long, it does actually move at a really good clip. I will say, just up front, I maybe didn't watch this at the best possible time, because I started it kind of late in the evening, and it was keeping my attention pretty well through the majority of it, but, like, that whole last section, like, after he drinks from the Grail, and it leads to, like, the fight with Mordred and everything, I was falling asleep like every 5 minutes. I was like, whoa, what's happening? Oh yeah, okay, they're fighting. Wait, what? So I didn't have necessarily the best kind of experience, but overall I did quite enjoy this film. What did you think of it, Steve?
I really liked it, actually. I had a weird experience with it too, because normally I like to watch everything in like one sitting, but I had like a busy night, so I had to watch like the first half of it, and then things came up, and then I had to watch the second half of it the next day. And normally that's not an ideal way to do it, but I found myself the next day actually like really excited to get back through the other half of the movie. The first like 30 minutes of it, I think, are maybe the worst segment of the film, because you're still kind of getting adjusted to the visuals and the style and the acting. And the guy who plays Arthur when he's young is awful. Just atrocious performance for like his first like 20 or so minutes on screen. I could not stand him. But then as the movie goes on, I thought he did a really good job. I actually really enjoyed this. I thought this was quite good, and I found it kind of wild in places. It's a very strange movie, just kind of structurally, because it's almost designed like it's a fucking biopic, but it's a King Arthur movie, and so like you have like these segments where the movie in general kind of moves at like a montage pace, like you're going through the important segments of this person's life as if it was a biopic and he was a real person. But obviously it's all mythology, and they never treat the mythology as such, except until like the very end when the dude throws the sword for the lady in the lake to catch. And I found that really interesting. And I thought it did a really good job of balancing the big sort of hard-hitting Arthur stuff people would know with a coherent narrative that kind of stitches it all together, so it's all just not random morality tales. I got quibbles here and there with it, because I feel like it's maybe has some weird tensions in places. I thought the costumes were kind of sucky, especially Merlin with his fucking tinfoil hat that he's got on the entire goddamn movie. And it just looks like a weird reflective surface. It looks so fucking dumb. But I was surprised watching this. I'm like, I see why Zack Snyder says this is his favorite movie, believe it or not. I went down a rabbit hole of Reddit from 2016 where people were like talking about the one-to-one parallels between this and Batman versus Superman, and suddenly I like appreciated both movies way more.
Oh my.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of stuff at the end where I'm like, oh, so that's where Peter Jackson got that bit in the Lord of the Rings. Okay. But I like this a lot. I thought this was really good. It's not the greatest movie in the world. It's kind of wild in places, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I think you and I are on a pretty similar like level with the movie, but I think we might have enjoyed different things about it.
Sure, yeah.
For me, the things that like, yeah, I agree. When Arthur is young, is when the actor is having the hardest time with it, and I don't know why, because he, like, it's like his acting and his facial hair come together. You know, like the second he gets facial hair, he's a much better actor.
You're right, though.
Right? Isn't it weird?
It's so strange. I didn't think of it like that.
So like that was kind of one thing that kind of stood out to me. For me, I think the element of this movie that is just the like absolute bar none the worst is the combat and fighting. I think is like actively terrible, and not in a way that's like that, at least in my opinion, feels stylized or intentional. I think it's just straight bad. Just the way that these guys fight, like the blows when they hit feel like they have absolutely no power behind them. There's no like sense of actual impact. It's more that someone like lightly gets brushed with a sword on the flat edge while they're in full armor, and then they're like, I'm bleeding all over the place.
Or at the end with Mordred, when you can clearly tell the lance he just has in his other arm.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Yeah, the fighting and stuff in this is really bad. I don't hate the costuming. I like when Lancelot shows up and he's like literally a knight in shining armor. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't like that the rest of the... I didn't like that all the knights felt very samey, because like until Lancelot shows up, they're all wearing just like, you know, very dark gray, almost black armor. You know, from Arthur to Lancelot, everyone's wearing the exact same suit of armor, and then after Lancelot, everyone's just wearing Lancelot's armor. I always thought that, you know, with the Knights of the Round Table, that everyone should kind of have like a distinct look, and, you know, be a little Justice League, a little Power Rangers kind of vibe. You know, Arthur's gold, Lancelot's silver, you know, Sir Robin could be green or whatever. You know, you just keep going down the list there. And, you know, it's like a fun way to stylize it, and it's funny because I think almost everything else I ever see with King Arthur does that except this, which is kind of funny. So those are like my main complaints. The pacing is actually like pretty fucking rapid pace. Like you said, it does kind of feel like a biopic where it's stringing everything together and to tell a cohesive story about Arthur's life, which I actually quite enjoyed. It's weird. I've always liked a lot of the, you know, castle shit. I guess I'd just call it not even necessarily fantasy, just castles and knights and stuff. I always liked that since I was a kid, and I was kind of thinking about it up to watching this movie throughout the week since, is that like growing up when I did, there was a lot of fantasy and castle shit, and I'd never really like realized the trend. But like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings were going on at the same time. In the book stuff, there was the Game of Thrones books were being published around that same time too. There was just a real appetite for like castle fantasy shit in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was when I was growing up and I was really into it. I'm not even naming everything. It's just there was a lot of it. And so I'd always kind of like that stuff. And despite knowing about King Arthur, and I think like everyone knows the Sword and the Stone, and just vaguely about the Holy Grail, but I don't think many people know like a lot of the in particular stories about it, about Arthur and stuff. And I kind of realized watching this, like, I actually don't think I've ever read or listened to or anything, any of Arthur's actual stories. So after watching the film, it kind of got me inspired, and I listened to a whole audiobook that was just a collection of the stories that had been published in the public domain. So it was really, yeah, it was really interesting to like do that retroactively to watching the movie and realize that the movie did like such a good job of stringing a lot of those stories together into a cohesive narrative. So I was really impressed by that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've never been big into Arthur. I don't know a lot about that mythology. I feel like I know it really selectively from like things I've heard are really good that I've like read or watched. Like when we did the Green Knight a year or two ago and reviewed that. So like a lot of this, I went in kind of fresh and I just kind of knew it by name only. But what I really gravitated towards was the way this movie just kind of plays so much of that stuff earnestly. And I think that melding of fact and fiction, if we want to kind of circle it back to this being History Month, even though we don't necessarily have to, but like I do sort of feel like that element here is really interesting and has kind of been a thread with all the stuff we've talked about so far, where the way Arthur talks about the Holy Grail, or the way Excalibur is treated by everyone who sees it or wields it, all of that is really, really religious. All of that is really kind of infused with the mythology to it, but everyone plays it straight. And no one at any point is kind of questioning people's authority for this. And there are these kind of like vignette morality tales that still kind of rest on a magical solution that I found really fascinating to watch. The fight with Lancelot and Arthur, I think, is maybe my favorite scene in the whole movie, where Arthur's rage gets the best of him and he beats Lancelot, but he breaks the sword, and then he learns his lesson and the Lady of the Lake repairs it. And there's just something about it where in any other movie that would be like a big sort of dramatic turning point, but it's like the fourth or fifth weird thing to happen in the movie by that point, you know, and nowhere near the last. And I kind of dug that about it. And I feel like they do that sort of human motivation of Lancelot is in love with Guinevere, that the whole movie kind of just revolves around fucking dudes who can't keep it in their pants. But they tie that in so naturally with all the magical stuff that you almost kind of forget that none of these characters really existed, that this is all just essentially mythology. And the way the people who wrote and directed the movie talk about this kind of serving as a move away from old pagan religions towards a more sort of unified Christian mythology, I think they kind of do a disservice to what they ended up making. Because I don't think by the end of this, everything sort of feels united. I feel like by the end of this movie is giving you like a really strong portrait of the different ways in which these cultures were melding, and that the Knights of the Round Table and their code of chivalry is a singular point in that history where people were united, but all of them came from different places, and ultimately their folly was in thinking that order and that resting point was going to be permanent. And I found all that really, really interesting. I liked most of the stuff that we got with the Knights of the Round Table, but you're right, I do wish they were a little bit more individualized. I feel like with the exception of Gawain and Lancelot, you didn't really get in anyone's head or really understand their motivations. They were just kind of there. But that was okay to me because I thought the conflict that they had was interesting. In particular, Lancelot's action, I think, is maybe the best in the movie. I think Lancelot and then Merlin are the two best performers in the whole thing.
Which is kind of funny to say when you got fucking Liam Neeson right there, right?
I know, right? And Helen Mirren, of all people.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. I like that you mentioned the King Arthur versus Lancelot fight, because while that was not a fight or story recorded at all in the myth I was listening to, It was really funny to me that like, because I listened to King Arthur and then Robin Hood got suggested next. I started to listen to that, and like all of them have the exact same structure of we're walking down the road. Hey, there's another dude. Let's fuck him up. And then they fight for like hours, and then they're like, "Oh man, you fight really well. Yeah, you fight really well. Want to be friends? Yes." And that's how they met. It's literally like, so that being the way that fucking Arthur and Lancelot meet is so fucking 1-to-1, with just this era of story.
I kind of love that though.
Like seriously, that's just how all of them go. Like Little John and Robin Hood, how do they meet? They're walking down the same road, and decided they're gonna fuck each other up, and then they did for hours.
That is incredible.
Yeah. See, that's the problem. Men aren't men anymore, Steve. When was the last time you made a lifelong friend by just beating the shit out of someone for an entire day?
You know what? You're right, and I feel kind of ashamed that I haven't gotten in a fight in a while.
Yeah.
No wonder I don't have that many friends.
Exactly. So yeah, but it is pretty funny to see how that all works together, and I'll definitely agree with you. I think the Lancelot versus Arthur fight was my favorite in the movie. It's also probably the only one that has decent choreography.
Yes, for sure.
Not good, but better. I liked the way that, again, continuing the like overarching narrative, the way that like Morgan Le Fay is handled in this, I thought was really, really cool. How we're introduced to her when she's like just a little girl, with the trick that Merlin pulls, which is something that wasn't in the myths I listened to recently, but was in something that I'd heard a while back, with Merlin helping him get fucking laid, and that leads to Arthur's birth. So it was pretty fascinating to just see the way that this all kind of pulls all these like disparate, very non-aligned stories. That's always kind of been my thing with any time I read like source mythology stuff. I'm always like so perplexed by how anyone made anything of it, because it's just such a like disparate narrative. Like these things are always just happening, but there's very little like cohesion to it, and it always kind of fucking floors me. And I realize that cohesion and narrative are really modern concepts, and I don't understand how. It always confuses me, honestly, but it just is the case. And so it's kind of a funny. It's just a funny way to see this film pull it all together, and I think it does a really, really good job of that.
I feel like it does so in a way where, if you're like me and you don't know anything about Arthurian myth, and you just like skim the summary of events here, you'd be really surprised if you went back and realized that there are lots of little plot cul-de-sacs that the movie is ignoring or kind of willfully piecing together in this way. Because the way it's written, and the way it feels while you're watching it, I don't feel like they're taking very many liberties, at least in the moment. And when you like go back and like, just for a refresher, I went through the Wikipedia summary of it again, and the way the Wikipedia summarizes all of it, it just sounds like, yeah, this is exactly how Arthur's myth went. There's no authorial omissions here. There's no creative liberties. This is just all exactly how it should go. And the fact that it's so seamless, I think, is a real testament to why this movie works, because in the moment, it doesn't feel like any section of the movie is forced in. I know that it's taking liberties because I know some Arthurian myths, and I know that they're not here or they're contradicted and stuff. But I'm not sitting here questioning like why the Green Knight stuff isn't in this movie, because the way they handle Goblin's character in this fits for the material you're watching, and you never kind of have that opportunity to talk about it in a different way. I really appreciate the fact, too, that instead of just kind of telling you this whole story in a way that makes everyone come off kind of squeaky clean, I like that Arthur gets to be kind of arrogant and full of hubris and make mistakes. And by the end, he dies in battle with his own incestuous son, and there is a certain kind of like pathos and tragedy to the whole thing. I enjoyed the bit early on when he starts roaming around with Merlin and he's just like decided he's going to be king. But I was worried that the movie was going to go in a direction where it was just going to lionize Arthur and make it seem like everything he did was perfect. But very quickly after he rounds up the knights, he is just making fuck up after fuck up. And the fact that the movie has that, I don't know if it's a twist or just like a reveal, that Arthur and Merlin and Excalibur are tied to the land, and so like when Arthur is sick, the land is sick. When he impales the sword into the ground, he stabs through Merlin. The way they talk about all of that, and Arthur is less a god and more just like a point in history that has its own life and death, and that it can make mistakes and that it can be weakened. I thought all of that was handled really well.
I guess I'd never, and again, that's getting toward the end of the movie where I was getting really sleepy. I didn't really comprehend that it was specifically Arthur's health and life was tied to the life of the land. That kind of went over my head, so it's really cool because as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, like I got that, he drank from the Grail and suddenly the land prospered again, and I thought that was more just like symbolic. I didn't realize it was actually literally there in the narrative. I was thinking like Scar from Lion King rules, where we blamed him for winter.
I mean, also fair.
Yeah. But no, that is a really cool detail. Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. Again, I know that those characters. I know Mordred's usually like her son. I don't think I'd seen anything or heard anything that made him Arthur's son before. And then when I listened to the myth stuff, it was actually his nephew, Foley nephew, in the myth I listened to. So like, I'm not sure if that's pulling from a different like telling of the events, but I liked the movie's take on it so much more. I thought that was like, again, so fucking twisted of her to like lay in wait all that time and then like use the thing that killed her father to get revenge on Arthur.
I love that so much, man. It's so like hardcore Greek mythy. It's so cool.
Yeah, and then like when Mordred's introduced and he's like just a little kid at first with the armor and he's like got that creepy fucking laugh, and then he like lures the one knight back to the castle with Morgan and shit, and he's just he looks so fucking terrifying. And then when I honestly wish they'd kept him a kid for the rest of the film at that point. It's funny because the other thing I know fucking Morgan Le Fay and Mordred from is
You're about to say Justice League, aren't you?
Justice League, right?
Oh, dude, fucking Justice League.
But yeah, there is something to like fucking Mordred just as this like eternal little shit of a child is just unsettling as fuck and creepy. And so I kind of dug the idea of just leaving him like that, but it's fine enough. It's kind of like the reverse of what happened with Arthur, where like the older the Arthur actor got, the better his acting got. But like the Morgan Le Fay the Mordred actor was better as like a kid, and then they recast him with an adult, and it's not as good. He gets less to do, but it's still just not as good. It's weird. He gets less to do, but he's in more scenes. So yeah, he's just not as fascinating to me. But I don't know. It was really cool. I like the scene that they had where he came to try to tell Arthur, like, die, old man, give me Camelot. It's my lands. It's mine by rights. And Arthur's like, the only thing I can give you is my love. It's the one thing I don't want from you. Yeah. That was fucking good shit.
The thing where he goes into his mom's room after the mist shows up and he kills her because he sees her grow old is really fucking twisted too.
Hmm.
I like that everything about this is kind of pulling from a variety of sources, and just like real mythology, there's multiple tellings of the same story, but there's also multiple stories in multiple cultures that all kind of parallel each other. And there is this kind of like the way they do Mordred, Morgan, and Arthur has a kind of like sick Oedipus Rex kind of vibe to it, and I love that moment where he kills his mother, um, and then dies in combat with his father and basically kills him too. It does have that sort of like sick, sort of twisted irony to it. That was really fun to watch,
Hmm.
uh, and I thought the take was interesting too because the fact that his birth and Arthur's ill health is what triggers the famine across the world, and this comes directly after they have that big sort of dinner scene where they talk about how like everyone's prospering and everyone's great, and then Gawain questions Guinevere's allegiance because she and Lancelot might have a thing, and like how everyone's lust immediately dooms them, at the point, at the height of their hubris, just like at the beginning, where
Hmm.
like the king basically got everything he wanted. Like it was the opening of the movie is a victory party, right? And the dude's like, "Nah, I gotta fuck her," and then suddenly everything goes to shit. And that's just a constant theme in this movie, and I kind of love that.
I love how just absolutely fucking awful Uther Pendragon is in everything. Like I've never seen any kind of adaptation or anything that makes Uther Pendragon out to be a good dude. He's always so shit, and like this just being like, "You've won the war. You're now the king of all Britain, and the men know you have divine right because you wield Excalibur." Man, I just really got to get this nut out, though. I just need it.
Literally. Oh my god, I love it.
He's just a fuckhead, and like even it's not even Merlin that questions him. It's his fucking men. They look at him like, "But sir, the truce." Ah, anything for a night with her, Merlin. Merlin. And also like Merlin's argument with him too when he comes to take Arthur is like, you betrayed the truce and you took his queen. You are not the true king. Men will never flock to follow you. And it's just like, and then like Arthur gets to be raised fucking Ma and Pa Kent style, and becomes like the greatest king because he's like fair and true. And I don't know, the idea that like Merlin's scamming and looking for the best king and how to find and like craft him, and then he ends up just literally making one. Is kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I was interested in what you thought of Merlin's character because I feel like in a lot of other things he is portrayed as at least a little bit more morally duplicitous, and in this version he's not always telling the whole truth, but he's always got like everyone's best interest at heart. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that necessarily because I felt like if anyone in this movie kind of feels infallible, it does sort of feel like it's Merlin.
Yeah, I guess I could see where you're coming with that. He's got like a weird vibe to him, doesn't he? Where he's got this like, literally, he's talking about this world is done with me. I'm going on to the next and shit. Like he doesn't actually seem human in this. Um,
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
you remember like when I'm sure you found this out and felt the same way I did. Remember when you found out like Gandalf's not a human in Lord of the Rings, and you're like, "What the fuck? Why? That's stupid." um,
Yeah, he's not just a really old dude.
yeah, right. It's just fucking dumb. But then like it, and I'm not saying that's like necessarily against the books. I just remember finding that out as it related to the movies and thinking it was really fucking stupid because
It makes him less impressive, in my opinion.
yeah, right.
That's just me.
But like here, Merlin never actually says that he isn't human, that he isn't a person, but he feels like he isn't. And that's really fascinating. Like, here it works.
Yeah.
And that's just really cool. He just feels so detached and really like he's just a part of a grander world or a different scheme. I know there's other things with Merlin that, like, make him immortal, which I never really care for. I created the greatest kingdom on earth and got to live in it while it lasted. And now I'm in 2023 voting for Donald Trump, like, just to see how they fuck it up more this time. I don't know, it's just always like a weird vibe to me. I don't love the idea of Merlin being immortal. I think it's more interesting that, like, he and Arthur's time all pass together.
And I do like that moment a lot that you mentioned where he, like, talks about maybe his time is done, and, like, it comes right on the heels of the famine about to strike, and then Arthur is weakened at the same time Merlin is trapped by Morgan Le Fay in the ice thingy. And I do kind of like that connection that they have, that Arthur and Merlin and Excalibur are kind of a trinity. And when any one of the three are missing is when essentially the world goes to shit. And then by the end, Merlin, just kind of fucks off? What happens with that?
I don't know, he fucks up Morgan Le Fay, and then there's just no more time for him to do anything. I guess. I don't know, it's kind of weird, because, yeah, he just, like... I like the duel he has, or not duel, I like the way he comes back from Morgan Le Fay, and he's like, oh, you've been using your magic to stay young. Let's hope that it's not used up all your energy to fight the dragon.
I love that scene so much. That's such a good moment where he's just, like, taunting her and goading her ego and haunting her in her nightmares until she uses up all her magic and causes the mist to show up. And again, there's that fun parallel with the beginning of the movie where the mist is the thing that led the other king to victory before he fucked it all up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's all really cool. I don't know what really happens to him after that point, because he does just kind of fuck off, and then Arthur and Mordred kill each other, and they do the thing. That's another story about throwing the sword in the lake. First, the guy doesn't want to, and Arthur tells him he has to. So I don't know. It's a weird one. It's just a good fucking time. You mentioned the Zack Snyder thing. What was the quote that you pulled from Snyder that's like, this was the perfect merging of film and mythology or something like that?
Yeah, he has this interview, because I was just, like, doing some research on the movie on the Wikipedia page, and he has this quote where he says, it's the perfect meeting of movies and mythology. And after I watched it, I'm like, I kind of see what you mean. And then I started doing some research, and I fell down this, like, Reddit rabbit hole from 2016, 2017, around the time the Ultimate Cut of BVS came out. And people were posting, like, these infographics and these essays and stuff talking about the one-to-one parallels between Excalibur and Batman versus Superman. And, like, how in one reading you could take the fight that Batman and Superman have towards the end of the movie as the scene with Lancelot, where Batman is Arthur, Lancelot is Superman, and Lois is the Lady of the Lake, and Excalibur is the Kryptonite Spear. And then Batman lets his anger and his hubris get the best of him and alienate a potential friend, and he tosses the spear into the water, and then it gets recovered by the Lady of the Lake, who's Lois. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But then there are other versions of the reading where they're like, where Arthur is not Batman, but Arthur is Superman, and that Superman's health and well-being is tied to the earth in the same way that Arthur's well-being is tied to the earth. And, like, when Superman gets struck through the chest by Doomsday and the spear, that's when the world suffers too. And I kind of dug all of that stuff, and I like the idea that maybe in some sort of twisted way, Zack Snyder wasn't trying to make a Batman movie, he wasn't trying to make a Superman movie, he wasn't even trying to make Dark Knight Returns or Death of Superman, he was just trying to remake Excalibur. And I'm like, you know what, maybe he should do that. If anyone could remake this movie and make the fight stand out, it's fucking Zack Snyder.
I mean, right? Like, that'd probably be a good little project for him.
I kind of want to see that now, you know? Like, imagine 300 in BVS amalgamated into a King Arthur story.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something people are a lot less precious about.
Mhm.
God, they they're talking about doing a King Arthur cinematic universe a couple of years back, and then all of these, the first movie came out and it failed, and so they abandoned it. Um, it had the dude from Sons of Anarchy on it as King Arthur. I actually do not like that actor whatsoever, but I do like Arthur being a blonde. I don't know why. It just there's something about it that just works. Um,
It's definitely very specific.
yeah, I don't know. It's just Arthur. Anytime I imagine King Arthur in my head, it's always just like a blonde guy with a beard and like a golden crown on his head. That's like not like a fancy dainty one, but like a crowned helmet kind of thing. Um, that's always kind of the vibe I get. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting to hear Snyder kind of gush about it because I don't really like a lot of what he does, but it's always interesting to hear him talk about film visuals and stuff because that's like definitely his area of expertise to me. And I just always that's what I will enjoy hearing from him. So just the way that like he kind of falls in love with and adapts and changes film and just can get really really into it is really kind of cool. So yeah, but watching this and kind of seeing just all the way that the mythology works and flows together, I thought was really cool. And again, just very impressed by it in a number of ways.
Yeah, I thought it was a really well-crafted movie on a lot of levels. They may not have had... They clearly had a big budget, but they didn't have a big enough budget, you know? Where they had the money to get all the extras and shoot a 2.5-hour movie and have like this big epic scope to it and really cool and creative visuals. But they also didn't seem to have enough money to make like the props and stuff look particularly good.
Yeah, a
If
lot
I
of
had
those
like
swords look bad.
Yeah, and if I have like one major like fatal flaw with the movie, I feel like Excalibur not looking special is maybe the biggest problem.
See, I don't know if I'd agree with that. I thought it looked special. It like it's the only sword that like gleams, and when it does gleam, it has like that green like shimmer to it and stuff. I think the problem is like it looks special in comparison to all the other swords, but all the other swords look
Sure.
like sheet metal cutouts, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. Like it looks better than those, but the standard's kind of low, so it doesn't feel like it stands out in the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, because like Excalibur, you always imagine is like maybe it's a gold sword and it's like got gems in it and shit. Um,
Um, One thing that I do really like about the movie that I also fell down a weird rabbit hole in is they use a lot of old school opera and classical music in the score, and
uh-huh.
I found like very few sources or like anyone talking about the specific music that's made for this movie. But I did find a whole lot of people talking about the other music that the movie reuses. In particular, it uses 3 different pieces of music from Richard Wagner's operas, and it's really interesting to see like Wagner music used in contemporary places. Because certainly we are not the first time in civilization where someone takes something in art, takes it out of its context, and then deploys it in a way that's complete opposite of its meaning, you know? Like all the people that watch like American History X and think Edward Norton is the coolest person on the planet, or like watch Fight Club and think Tyler Durden has everything right. We've been doing that shit since the dawn of time. And one good example is like the bridal march you hear at people's weddings for like decades now is a piece of Wagner music that plays before 2 people get married and then are doomed, and they don't end up together. So, like, it's kind of ironic that we play music that cues 2 people breaking up to symbolize people getting married, but whatever. So they do that in this movie, and they borrow a piece of Wagner music for when Arthur pulls the sword out of the stone. But interestingly, the music that they use for Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone is from Siegfried's funeral. So, like, for the second he's pulling the sword out of the stone, it's like he's essentially like signing his own death warrant. Like, by pulling the sword out of the stone, we're already kind of in mourning over the fact that Arthur and the land and the sword are kind of linked, and when he goes, everything goes. And I thought that, maybe not intentional, because it does sound kind of epic, it does have its own sort of deeper meaning to it. And then there is this dude who did a blog post on WordPress that I got kind of circled into, where he talks about the use of the Parsifal opera track and overlaid over the Search for the Holy Grail. And the song is called Parsifal, and it's played over Percival finding the Grail. And I thought that was pretty fucking funny.
That's pretty good. What's the song that plays when they're like riding off to battle Mordred, and there's like the land is regrowing and stuff? It's like that really epic.
That's not from Wagner. I think that's from Carmina, but I don't know the name off the top of my head.
It was just funny because Haley and I were watching it, and she starts cracking up. And she goes, "Really, that song?" And I'm like, "I mean, this is '81. This might be the first movie that used that to be epic. You don't know."
Yeah, I like dug all that choices. I like that it had like a big sort of operatic score. It had like a big epic fantasy scale, and it takes all of the mythology of King Arthur and unifies it into like one epic tome. It does sort of feel like it's adapting some kind of like 800-page biography about King Arthur's life, and I kind of love that.
Yeah, I think it's a very impressive narrative to structure. Because I don't think you could necessarily do that with a lot of other mythologies. Maybe Norse, because it's got like an ending in the cycle with Ragnarok. But like Greek myth, like everyone kind of agrees you start with the Titans, eating. You start with Kronos eating all his kids and Zeus defeating him or whatever. But like, the problem is that the same shit happens with Kronos and Uranus. Just the same fucking sequence of events, and Greek mythology doesn't really have an ending. There's no like through line to any of it. It just kind of shit just keeps happening. Stories keep evolving and stuff.
Arthur is like positioned in like a fun spot in actual history too, because a lot of those myths coming out in the medieval ages, where you are actually moving from old school mysticism towards more like religious but centrally Christian religious and scientific origins. And so like the myths are less about explaining natural phenomenon like the Greek myths were. Like, they're not trying to explain where fucking spiders come from or something, but are instead specific morality tales that sound like they could have been true of the time. So like, you could tell a kid in the time Arthur's stories in the 12th century were popular about a knight named Arthur in a far off kingdom, and it doesn't sound made up.
Yeah, there's the majority of it like doesn't really have much to do with magic. Like, Merlin's not throwing fucking boulders through the air and shit. Like, you'd kind of think whenever I think about Arthur, I always think about like really high fantasy magic, like people riding dragons and shit. But I was listening to the stories. Nah, it's mostly just like dudes keep fighting each other. Is just all it really comes down to. Lancelot's really funny because like there's like all these stories about the other Knights of the Round Table, but they all kind of get just over time attributed to be Lancelot stories.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because Lancelot's basic, like I guess the way to think about it is Lancelot is inherently tied into King Arthur, but he was kind of his own myth to start. So it's kind of like what happened with Captain Marvel in DC Comics.
Okay.
Where like initially like he's his own thing, he's his own world, but just over time he just became a part of the DC universe, and now it's like kind of hard to imagine him existing on his own anymore.
That's weird. So where does the Lancelot myth start coming from?
It's just like the idea of like a brave knight, blah 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 blah. And they all kind of just become Lancelot over time. Because he's just like the perfect shining knight at everything. And so like you'll have stories there that are like other characters have a very similar story to this thing that happened to Lancelot too. Like a lot of the stories of like, oh, this spear that's stuck in the ground that no one can lift until the knight comes over to do it. Um,
Oh, that Lancelot, he must have done it.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of interesting how that develops. Just seeing that all together is something else. I don't know. I guess here's my question for you: does watching this movie make you want to like do what I did and go like actually seek out some King Arthur mythology, or do you think the
Oh,
movie's just enough?
100%. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
by the time it was over, I was like really into it and I kind of want the trouble with it is I don't have the attention span for mythology. I don't think I've ever had the attention span for mythology. So like if you can give me like a really good King Arthur novel or a really good King Arthur like movie, I'll watch it. But when you tell me to like go out and read like these short stories that can't be attributed to anyone, I get really bored.
Okay, that's fair. Ruben, Comics Kid 2099, who used to be on the show, he's a big King Arthur guy. And
Yeah, I remember.
the book that he had me read was, I think it's called The Crystal Cave, if memory serves, and that's like a Merlin focused thing. It's like Merlin's like starts with Merlin as a kid kind of thing. And that was pretty good. I liked that a lot.
I
It
have to
didn't
give that a
quite
try.
get like the same level of epic that I wanted it to get to, but I just kind of realized that's not Arthur. Arthur just isn't as like high fantasy and epic as I guess my childhood self thought it was. Um, so
Yeah,
uh,
it's not even really seemingly. It doesn't even seem like it's as epic as like that Disney Sword in the Stone movie either.
yeah, no, it's like the Merlin turning him and Arthur into like animals and shit, and Merlin coming
Yeah.
from the future. Okay, I watched that movie not recently, but a while back with Leah, and Merlin in that is so fucking stupid that his owl. He's trying to teach Arthur about history, right? He's like, to be a great king, you'll need to know history. But because he's like aware of all of time and space, he just starts from like the end, and he's like just starts describing like World War II, and then he starts working his way backwards. Um,
That's incredible.
like that's such a fucking weird idea to throw in the movie, and like the owl has to go, you can't teach him history backwards, you'll confuse the boy. How's he supposed to know what the new world is if he doesn't even know what's happening?
I actually kind of love that.
Yeah, no, it's fucking crazy. That scene just stuck out to me so hard. I was like, what the actual fuck? But also, if you watch that movie, you're going to see the horniest fucking squirrel of all time.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm here for it. Might have to
Yeah.
watch that later.
Yeah, that is like the furries have clearly missed their mark because that movie has the most like down bad squirrel lady ever. um, the squirrels want that dick. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, I don't know. King Arthur, Excalibur, good fucking movie. I did like it. Again, I feel bad for kind of, falling off of it by the end of it. And I was like, maybe I should still watch the end again or something. And I might one day, but I'd have to re-rent it off of Google again. I don't really want to do that right now.
I think the best thing you can say about the movie though is like if this was on TV on like a Sunday afternoon or something, or someone asked you, "Hey, you want to watch Excalibur with me?" I would like no hesitation say sure, or just like start watching. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like a chore if you have to go back and watch the ending again. It's just a fun fucking movie.
it was weird because like when we started it, Haley's like, "Okay, yep, I've seen this before," and I'm like, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." She's like, "It used to play on TV all the time." I'm like, "I've never seen this anywhere." Again, when I picked it
Same.
the other week, you were like, I hope that doesn't suck, Ian. Way to just pull a random movie out of your ass. And like, you know what? Fuck you, Steve. This was pretty good.
This fucking asshole makes me watch a 2.5-hour movie from the 80s. Then I watch it, I'm like, oh shit, this movie rocks. Holy shit, this was so good.
It was though. It's got like
It
a good
was.
vibe to it. And then there's just like surprising casting. It's like fucking Patrick Stewart.
Patrick
Holy
Stewart.
shit. And this would
He's
be
in the movie for like 30 seconds.
a little bit longer, but yeah, it's interesting because this would be like Patrick Stewart before Next Generation too.
Yeah.
Like just before, because I think that's like 84 or 85 when Next Generation starts up. And this was 81, so yeah, it's like just before he like really pops off from that. But it was kind of crazy. It's also very funny that like no matter what Patrick Stewart is in, he is always playing a man who is too old for what he's doing anymore. Like, I don't understand what Picard could possibly be, because all of the Next Generation was basically like, aren't you a little too old to still be a captain? Aren't you too old for this job now? And it's like, no, apparently not.
I was blown away by watching Patrick Stewart in this and looking at him and be like, this movie was 40 years ago, and he looks basically the same.
Yeah, he got a little more wrinkly, that's it.
He got a tiny bit more wrinkly. He's a little thinner now. That's probably about it.
I mean, he could put on some weight if he really needed to.
If he needed to, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's like, what it is just he's been bald for so long that like the only time he looks old is when he lets his hair grow out. And you see just how gray and like thin it is, you know?
It's just so weird though, right? To like think of a human being that looks the same in the 80s as they do in 2020.
Yeah.
It's just fucking nuts.
I don't know. Fucking Patrick Stewart and Samuel L. Jackson really got that going for them, where they just don't really age, and it's fucking crazy.
It's
and they're also in quite a bit, so it's like, shit. When did this movie come out? I can't tell based on the actor.
It's a good point.
You know, you watch like a Bruce Willis movie and it's like, 90s Bruce Willis, 2000s Bruce Willis, right?
You can tell how old the movie is by his hairline.
Yeah. Not fucking those guys. It's crazy. Yeah, so you had like Patrick Stewart and Liam Neeson in this. I don't think I've ever seen the Arthur actor in anything else.
I don't even remember what his name was, to be honest with you.
Yeah. This is a bit disappointing. Like, I kind of wish they'd put some of the... I guess they wouldn't even have known how much of a powerhouse, like, Liam Neeson would become. But I could have seen him...
Not at this point in time, yeah.
Yeah, like, he could have been a really... I think he would have been the better choice for Arthur, because just knowing what he's eventually capable of, and he just doesn't get much to do in this one.
Yeah, I'm looking through the dude's wiki, and I'm only seeing, like, TV movies and stuff. I've not seen any of this shit before. He's in a version of Troy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Not the good one from '04 that we both like?
Oh, wait, he is in that one. That is that Troy. It's the Brad Pitt Troy.
Oh, really? Who the fuck does he play?
Archil Talamus.
Okay, yeah. Fucking nobody. Okay.
Yeah, no fucking idea who that is.
Yeah. Probably one of the kings that's like fighting with not Ulysses, Agamemnon.
Yeah, he's just in a lot of like random mythology or history inspired stuff. Like he's in a fucking Genghis Khan movie that doesn't even have a Wikipedia page.
Okay. I guess he just like really found his fucking niche apparently.
Yeah. The other really big casting though in this that surprised me was fucking Helen Mirren as Morgan Le Fay.
Yeah.
And like I like her in this. Nothing about her performance is bad. I think she's great. But I was surprised that I watched a movie with young Helen Mirren and I didn't think she was the best performer in the movie. Like that just tells you how good everyone is by the end.
Yeah. It's interesting because she's in so fucking much. Because isn't she in Caligula as well?
I think so.
pretty sure she's in Caligula. Because that's the other thing that I remember her being in that like really kind of threw me when I first saw her show up. Oh, she's played Catherine the Great too. Huh. Yeah, she was good. It's a good time. Good time.
Yeah, good movie. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess we'll call it a day there then. There's not much else to talk about with this one, I don't think. Besides, yeah, I'm gonna watch it again eventually. In the future,
Yeah,
I'll go back to this one.
Yeah, I'm surprised by how much we both actually ended up enjoying it.
Right? And again, it's not the kind of movie I would typically enjoy, but it does just enough with the pacing to really, really have kept my interest through like 99% of it, and I appreciate it for that, because this is a bit of like one of those higher brow film kind of things, especially with the dialogue choices that they do. It's, made in the 80s, but it's written like it's, classic film kind of cinema stuff.
Well, and with the Arthur actor, when he's young, he says all his dialogue so fucking fast that you really have to pay attention.
But yeah. All right. Well, Alfie picked what we're going to be talking about next week. So hopefully he's able to make it for one of these fucking episodes of History Month. This one's admittedly mostly my fault, so sorry about that. But still, goddamn. So next week, Alfie wants us to talk about the history of combat sports, how we decide to wage war, if it's intrinsic to our nature, what it says about us in the eras that it's evolved, our fave types of it, etc. Man, that's gonna be one heck of a fucking thumbnail.
I was wondering if he could be any more vague than that. Like, is it physically possible to be more vague than that? Like, oh, you just want to talk about human nature and war, okay.
Alright, in all fairness, I have said that we would do an episode of Geeky Gentlemen talking about ninjas. So...
Yeah, but ninjas have a niche, They're niche ninjas. War, though.
What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Say it again. Oh, okay. I think we're done with Geeky Gentlemen forever now. I don't think we're going to top that.
So fucking good. I love it.
All right. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am not British.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.